Welcome back, folks, for a new episode of Leaked, and today we'll cover the WZ-111 5A. So this is going to be a normal tier 10 Chinese heavy tank. It will not be Chinese server exclusive, so no need to be upset. This vehicle will be available to all the servers in patch 9.19.1. Also, this vehicle will not replace the 113 heavy tank. So if you already researched and kept the 113, you'll still keep it, but this vehicle is basically a second option to grind for while playing the WZ-111 1-4 at tier 9. So now you have two options to choose from for the tier 10 Chinese heavy tank, like the T-54 into the Object 140 or the T-62A first. So two options. That's pretty nice. But this vehicle is not a stranger. Originally, this vehicle was super tested in patch 8.2, and that was 4.5 years ago. So it was meant to replace the 113 with this vehicle, but during the testing, this vehicle was pretty much broken compared to the IS-7. So made the IS-7 looks stupid, looks bad, and therefore this vehicle was not implemented. But after 4.5 years, it came back. So let's see if this vehicle is still pretty much broken as before. But what is the WZ-111? Well, it is the Chinese analog to the T-10 heavy tank, the IS-8 or IS-10. But during the 60s or afterwards, the relationship between China and Soviet Russia had a fallout. So their ideology for communism and history behind that had a fallout. So different visions, but no longer were the information or the technologies being shared between these two countries. So China want to upgrade their copies of IS-2s and IS-3s. So they want to implement their technologies over for a better heavy tank. So basically in the same race as Soviet Russia, but afterwards high explosive anti-tank shells and smoothbore guns with fin stabilized discarding sabot, so heavy tanks were useless. But they did build a prototype hull and tried out the turret with different guns, but it's like the Kranvagn, the Swedish heavy tank. Afterwards they decided, yeah, heavy tanks were useless, tank destroyers were useless because the weaponry, so let's just build main battle tanks. So it's like the same fate as the Kranvagn. They built the prototype hull and they kept it, surprisingly, because a lot of the vehicles deemed obsolete were tested for nuclear radiation as well as blast, so subject to bombardment from artillery. But they actually preserved this vehicle prototype hull, so it's not exactly a paper tank. Well, most of the other stats were paper-ish, blueprint-ish, but the hull was built. So the weaponry, that's another story. So but here you can see the hull is kept, similar to the Kranvagn, but they did paint it over the years, so that's pretty nice. Cherish the actual history by preventing the rust, because it's outside and constantly gets battered by rain and snow and other crap. So that's the fate of old vehicles. But yeah, it's like in the game compared to the IS-3, compared to the IS-2. So afterwards, the Chinese developed the Type 69 and Type 79, and therefore main battle tanks were the thing and heavy tanks were useless. Same goes for tank destroyers, so deemed obsolete. And this vehicle survived the testing phase with different artillery pieces as well as nuclear shells, so that's good. But here is patch 8.2's WZ-111 5A. So back then it looks, well, it is basically the same exact vehicle model as the 1-4 at tier 9 with the same 130 but better stats, and that was it. So basically the same vehicle at tier 9 but with better stats at tier 10. Kind of a letdown. I started to play World of Tanks during patch 8.3. So this was like 3 months or 4 months before I started playing, but did not make it. So here is the original collision model. As you can see, the same armor as the 1-4 at tier 9. So you can check this out, but the same turret armor, the same 120 for the hull. It had a weaker, looks like weaker lower plate, but I don't know, it say the same thing. It shared the same color for the Tank Inspector model, but it's different on this model. So Tank Inspector was not invented back then. It came out in patch 8.7 or so. Alright, but here are the original stats compared to the IS-8, now called the T10, and the IS-7 back then. So I think they already nerfed the IS-7. They nerfed it in patch 8.0. It was super OP before that. So originally you had the E100. No. You didn't have the E100. You have the mouse or the IS-7. And then came the T110E5. No. Then came the T30. Yeah, then came the T30. It was pretty good, but they nerfed the crap out of that to turn that into a tier 9 tank destroyer after implementing the E5 and E4s. It was a long time ago. So take a look at the stats, but these don't mean much. Oh well. But here are the HD models for the current upcoming version of the tank. So looks a lot different than the 1-4. That's good. A lot of the clutter stuff like spare track links, boxes, canvas, stuff for the crew at the back of the turret, cable, that's good. But looks pretty nice. Fuel tanks at the back. It looks a lot prettier than the 1-4 in my honest opinion, but hey, you should make a little bit difference because it's basically the same vehicle with the same gun, just with better stats. But yeah, it's not a bad looking tank. It's a Chinese tier T10 basically. So tier 9, tier 10, same thing. But it does look pretty nice. I love the toolbox for the crew, fuel tanks, good stuff. But presumably, you have to research the 130mm on the 1-4 to research this vehicle. Originally, for the 113, you can just bypass the upgraded turret and the upgraded 130 and just straight research the 113 while playing the 1-4. But for this vehicle, I'm presuming that you have to research this gun, which is 24,000 XP for the turret and 66 for the gun, and then the 198,000 for the vehicle. So it's a lot of XP, but you don't want to play the tier 10 vehicle with the stock gun like the IS-4 with the D25T. That's stupid. So the stock grind is surprising because it doesn't have, the 1-4 does not have the upgraded 122 that's on the WZ-120 or the 121. That's very surprising because the STI or ST1 has the upgraded 122 that's on the other heavy tank line for the IS-10 or T10. But you have to stock grind the D25T to research the IS-3's Top Gun if you haven't played IS-3, so it's stupid. But for the 1-4, there's no 122 from the WZ-120 or the 121 or the 113, surprisingly. So you have to grind with the 100mm that's on the 110. And yeah, it's good gun, but it's more of a medium tank slash light tank gun at tier 9. So ugh. But here are the collision models for this vehicle. As you can see, it's basically the same vehicle as the 1-4, with the exception of better hull armor for the upper frontal plate, about 20mm, 50 more millimeters of turret armor at a different shade of rainbows on the turret. So same cupola, 150mm for the loader and the commander. Okay, but lower plate is the same. So basically, you have a weaker driver hatch, stronger upper plate, and stronger turret front. different mantlet in terms of mantlet armor, but it's still pretty thick, 250 at the front, so that's mostly the armor difference. The side armor, the rear armor is about the same. So nothing really changed, but pause the video, you can look through the values for the difference of the armor, but basically turret roof is auto bounce, so don't even think about it. Turret front, yeah, 260 to 300 millimeters. So this cheek, flat cheek right here, but unless you're playing something like the Jagdpanzer E100 and you're willing to use the 170 millimeter high explosive anti-tank round, sure. Wait, yeah, use high explosive anti-tank, not APCR, but you're not penetrating this turret front. So for the cheeks right here, it's sloped at 2 degrees or 2 angles, so different degrees of 2 angles. Don't even think about it. For the mantlet, it's 250 for the flat parts and about 150-ish right here, so it's rounded. Don't even think about it. So basically, the only way of penetrating the turret is the cupolas on top, and that's it. For the hull front, it's 140 rather than 120 on the 1-4. So I took some calculations, but it's about 260 millimeters effective with AP shell. So unangled, it's relatively good, but a lot of players will gold spam. So gold spamming with high explosive anti-tank, you have to have 310 millimeters effective of armor. So unless they're shooting like gold AP shell, and that's pretty rare. Basically the Type 5 with the gold 140, a lot of the rounds will pretty much bounce unless you're unangled or unangling the frontal pike nose, basically angling your hull, and you don't want to do that for pike shape shachuka hull shape design. So but for this part right here, it's 10 degrees, basically auto bounce. The driver hatch could be penned if it's 60 millimeters, but it has a shade of green that's 60 or 80. If it's 80, it's pretty hard to pin. If it's 60, it's easier. So you have to find this out with the actual model. So cannot tell from the actual picture, but whatever. Lower plate is the same as the 1-4, so 120 at about 35 degrees. So with AP shell, 186.7 you'll pin. So armor wise, basically the same as the 1-4, but better upper plate, better mantlet, and turret front, and that's it. Weaker driver hatch, and yeah, not that much difference. Same goes for the side armor, same side armor, but better shading and spread of the redness on the turret, so more defined. But 120 for the upper parts of the hull, 80 for the middle section. You do have space armor for the side, similar to the IS-8 series, IS-3 series. So this will probably absorb a lot of the shots, but aim above or below, mostly below. And for the rear, 60 millimeters, so pretty much similar, not that much difference, not much. But here are the initial stats, so quick summary, but take a quick look. It has crazy DPM, abnormally high gun depression, so 10 degrees, and it's fairly mobile. Doesn't have the same terrain resistance. It's a little bit weaker than the 1-4, but has a stronger engine, 750 horsepower. So it's a medium tank-esque of a mobility, but compared to the 113, this is more of a heavy tank, whereas the 113 is more of a heavy tank slash medium tank. But then again, all IS chassis-esque of a heavy tank is more of a medium compared to super giants like the E100 or the Mouse. So it's fine. But take a look at the high explosive anti-tank shell, 340. Makes the IS-7 look stupid. IS-7 is 303 for the APCR. Ugh. So here are the main stats. Concluded, Tier 10 normal Chinese heavy tank, crew of 4, normal matchmaking, 6.1 million credits cost, and 198,000 XP. Besides the gun, besides the upgraded turret on the 1-4. Health is 2200, below average. It's better than the IS-7, but not much, by 50, so it's still pretty low health, but it's similar to the E5 or other heavy or 113, so not that much health. 750 horsepower engine for 50 tons, has a 15 horsepower per ton ratio, so that's pretty good for a heavy tank. Way above average, average is around 12. Top speed of 50 kilometers per hour. Good. Not as good as the IS-7. IS-7 could go up to 60 kilometers per hour, about. Reverse of 15, average. Hull traverse, pretty nice, 36 degrees per second. Turret traverse is average, 27.1 degrees per second. Terrain resistance, above average for hard and medium. Below average for soft, so soft is alright because based on the horsepower per ton ratio, shouldn't be that big of a problem, but yeah, hard and medium, that's great for that high of a horsepower per ton ratio for heavy tanks. Now view range, average 400 meters, radio range, standard. Camera rating is better than the average. Average is about 4 or 7, so this is relatively sneaky, like a E50 levels of sneakiness compared to the Type 5 or Type 4. So 140 at the front for the hull, 120 for the sides, 60 for the rear. Turret armor 300 at the front, 180 and 60 at the rear. So already covered the armor, but 130mm gun, 40 rounds. That's pretty good considering the IS-7 has 30 rounds for the same caliber. That's pretty nice. AP, high explosive anti-tank and high explosive, so penetration is 244. For the AP shell, that's below average, but it's not bad. It's not like the original E100s, 150 at 230mm pen. That's bad, but 244, that's workable. And 340 for the high explosive anti-tank. That's good. That's great. 65 for the high explosive. And you don't use that much unless you're shooting like paper tanks, so Waffentraegers mostly, and artillery. But you would kill an artillery with normal AP with that much alpha. So 490 alpha, yeah, that's pretty good, but it's not as crazy as the large calibers, 150, 140 for the Type 5 or 152s, but it's fine. It's like the IS-7 or the Yak Tigers. So, good alpha. Rate of fire, 6.32 rounds per minute. Below average, but that's mostly inflated because of the 120 for the FE-215Bs and the T-110E5. That's fine. But DPM is crazy. 3097. Put special gun rammers, the improved gun rammers, improved vents, and vertical stabilizer. You have like 3500 DPM, and this thing reloads at 8.5 seconds for that much alpha. Insane value. But accuracy is below average, slightly, 0.37. Aim time is long, so like any Russian guns or Chinese guns, 3 seconds, 3.07 seconds. So yeah, that's rough, but you could put vertical stabilizer, you put enhanced gun lane drive. That would help, but would you rather put enhanced gun lane drive or vents? I would rather put vents, but 10 degrees of gun depression. What? It's a Chinese vehicle / Russian vehicle. They don't have that much room in the turret. How the hell do you get 10 degrees of gun depression without the breech jamming up on the turret roof? That's impossible. And 23 for elevation, so that's consistent with the 113 with the WZ-111s at tier 8 and tier 9, so consistent. But yeah, it's better than the 113s. 18 elevation, 18 degrees of elevation, and 5 for depression. The depression for the side of the 113 is getting buffed to 7, but this is 10. It's better than E5 or T57 Heavy. Holy crap. So here are the final thoughts and opinions about the WZ-111 5A. So not a Chinese server exclusive, everybody will get it on all the servers. So alternative option for the tier 10 Chinese heavy tank after the 1-4 will cost 2000 XP less than the 113, but you'll still have to research the gun. I wouldn't play the 1-4 without the 130. So playing that vehicle with the 100mm is like you're asking for trouble, or you're masochist. You want the pain, so why would you? Originally tested during patch 8.2, deemed too OP, then the IS-7 cancelled. So it has the alpha, the module damage, ammo count, hull traverse, horsepower per turn ratio, top speed, hard and medium tank resistance, terrain resistance, and camo rating. So pretty mobile of a heavy tank, but it has insane DPM and gun angles. Penetration is a little bit wonky, 244. Yeah, it's kind of bad. Accuracy, below average. Aim time, long, 3.07 seconds. Ugh. So kind of crap. Soft terrain resistance, yeah. Health and weight, inflated by the super heavies. It's not that heavy, only 50 tons. So basically, it's the second highest DPM for tier 10 heavy tanks. So the first one is the T-57 Heavy, the third is the Chieftain, or close enough is the FE-25B, but this is a Russian gun-esque of a large caliber gun. It's not 120, so more slower firing, quote unquote, than the 120, but yet it has a lot of DPM. Interesting. Also, it's a large caliber gun, similar to the Mouse, the Panzerkampfwagen Mark 7, and the IS-7. Does not have the trouble of dealing module damage, and with the pesky S-tanks, this will overmatch the S-tank's armor of 50mm. Not 50, 40mm. My bad. But then again, some parts are 50, some parts are 60, so shoot high explosive. Has more ammo capacity compared to only 30 rounds on the IS-7 for the same caliber of a gun. Nice. And AP shell. Did I just skip one? Nice, Sam. AP shell penetration will be mitigated, ignored when spamming gold shell. So high explosive anti-tank shells, insane value compared to the IS-7's like 303mm of pen for APCR. Yeah. So basically, it's similar mobility to the 113, only slightly less horsepower per turn ratio, same top speed, terrain resistance, traverse, view range, and camo and radio, but it's very subtle similarities to the IS-7, but dramatic trade-off. Basically, IS-7 with a lot better DPM, better gun angles, better hull traverse, better gold shell, at the cost of 0.4 horsepower per turn ratio, but you have better terrain resistance by 15.4% for hard, 33.31 for medium, and 19.37 for soft. So basically almost firing 2 more rounds of 130mm in a span of a minute than the IS-7 with better accuracy. What? So weak spots, yeah, it has some. The lower plate, similar to the 1-4, similar to the regular version as the premium tier 8, has the cupola, maybe the driver hatch, but it has 10 degrees of gun depression. So just gun depress. It will automatically hide the lower plate, give a better sloping to the driver hatch, hide the cupolas. It's better hull down than any American or British, or not as good as the Kranwagen, but it's better than NATO countries. Most NATO countries, large heavy tanks. That's fun. So is it worth it? Well, in essence, it's more of a clone tank theory, so basically a same vehicle at tier 9 but better stats. But you will see a lot of these vehicles in ranked battles and clan wars just because of the DPM and the gold shell and the mobility and the gun angles. What? 10 degrees? What the? So might be even more devastating to face than the old pre-nerfed T110E5. So T110E5 has 2,500 DPM. Pretty good penetration, 258mm, but it has the mobility, has 8 degrees of under pressure, and unpenetrable cupola. So that was pretty good OP of a heavy tank. This vehicle is like that. You can hide the cupola, you can hide the lower plate, but it has 3,000 DPM. And pretty devastating alpha and high explosive anti-tank shell. Scary. So I think a lot of players will play this vehicle if this vehicle has 5 degrees of gun depression, just because of the DPM and the gold shell. But now it has 10 degrees of gun depression. So super skeptical of all the stats, guys. Super skeptical. You cannot have that good of a stats on a Chinese vehicle just because the turret is so cramped. It's Russian based. How the hell do you have the gun breech jam up into the turret roof to have that much gun depression? Physically, I don't think it's logical or based on physics and math. Unreal spaces, guys. Where's the space? So I'm expecting a DPM nerf as well as gun depression nerf mostly, but if you nerf those, this vehicle is basically a 1-4 at tier 10. Feels like deja vu. So similar to 8.2 back then, this vehicle basically a tier 10 version of the 1-4. Now it has 10 degrees of gun depression and insane DPM. So I don't know, but this vehicle is basically the same thing as the WZ-111 GFT and the 1GFT. So the GFT is the larger caliber right here, 152. And the GFT or 1GFT is the smaller caliber with 130. But I mean, these vehicles are supposedly planned to be built, but they don't see actual, blueprints and other stuff. So we don't see that crap. And due to the secrecy of the government as well as the archives, who knows? So I think the WZ-111 5A falls into the same category as the Chinese tank destroyers. Yeah, they want to put 130mm onto a WZ-111 chassis. They never did that. So technically they are fake tanks. And you cannot prove or disprove the blueprints existing. So it could be artist renditions or renderings of actual blueprints, or just basically artistic drawing of not really blueprints. So who knows? But there you go, folks. The WZ-111 5A. So I apologize for jumping around the vehicle stats and different things. A lot of stuff is going through my mind, so that's my fault. I'm doing everything live, so everything is not pre-recorded. Fudge it, we do it live. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Gangnam Style. Op, 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 Gangnam Style.